And for the last 4 years, since 2015, there has been a peace march along that DMZ. So Christine has been a real leader of trying to get citizen diplomacy as a part of our efforts, our effort to get our nation to stop this warmongering that we have toward North Korea. And for the sake of all the Koreans, North and South Koreans, and for the sake of our own country, it is so important. So we have been, over the last 4 years, we have talked with North Korean women in China and Mongolia and Indonesia. We continue our work with women across the demilitarized zone. And Christine, who has been the spearhead for all of this, has sent us this message. Aloha and greetings from Honolulu, where Hurricane Lane is wreaking havoc across the Hawaiian Islands. Hawaii has actually been shielded from hurricanes in the past due to cooler Pacific waters, but with sea temperatures rising, we'll be seeing more and more climate disasters. This is a real security threat facing us all, yet the majority of our nation's public dollars are handed over to military contractors in preparation for endless war. Since I'm not able to be with you tonight, I've asked me and Wright to share this brief message. I want to start by extending my deepest gratitude to Veterans for Peace for its constant and steady work for peace and justice around the world. Whether leading delegations to Jeju Island, Sonju, Okinawa, or elsewhere occupied by the U.S. military, or by the work led by Jerry Condon to draft the People's Peace Treaty with North Korea. How many of you all have signed that? The People's Peace Treaty? Not too many, so we need to get you all to sign. This is reminiscent of, remember that during the Vietnam War, we had a People's Peace Treaty with Vietnam, with North Vietnam. But we have one with the people of North Korea, so please sign that. And those of you working for peace on the Korean Peninsula, we've always counted on Veterans for Peace solidarity, and you've always delivered. And it brings me to tears thinking about the tireless devotion of VFP members such as John Kim in New York. John, wave your hand. He's the head of our VFP Working Committee on Korea. And Michael Wong in San Francisco has helped get the statue for comfort women in San Francisco. While I'm not able to be with you, I want to convey one message. We are in a historic opportunity to end the 7-decade Korean War, a brutal war which claimed over 4 million lives in 3 years. The U.S. dropped over 635,000 tons of bombs on Korea, more than the entire Asia-Pacific theater in World War II, and 33,000 tons of napalm, more than the U.S. dropped even in Vietnam. The U.S. indiscriminate bombing campaign leveled 80% of North Korean cities, killing 1 out of every 4 family members. In just 4 months into the war, the U.S. bombing campaign so devastated North Korean homes that the government urged its citizens to make shelters underground. We in the U.S. were never told that story. Instead, we get a one-sided story of how evil the North Korean regime is, and that it is the greatest threat to American security. There's no context for why North Korea has even pursued nuclear weapons. Most can understand that North Korea doesn't want to be another Libya or Iraq. But what about the fact that the U.S., 65 years after signing an armistice and first introducing nuclear weapons into South Korea, still strikes to overthrow the North Korean regime? North Korea is the most sanctioned country in the world due to the U.S.-led sanctions regime, which have been so draconian that it has grinded humanitarian aid work to a halt in a country where over 40% of its people are in need. And as you have recently watched online, the unresolved war is the reason why millions of Korean families remain separated, unable to see, touch, or embrace their loved ones. It is one of the most tragic, cruel, and violent injustices facing the Korean people. As we shed tears for those elderly Koreans who can only hold their loved ones for 11 hours after missing each other's entire lives for 65 years. We must finish the job and finally end the longest standing U.S. war.
Yes.
Many say, let the Koreans take care of it. After all, it was the People's Movement, the Candlelight Revolution, in which 16 million South Koreans, 1 in 3 of all South Koreans, took to the streets and ousted the neocon President Park Geun-hye and swept in the pro-peace President Moon Jae-in.
Yeah.
Within 15 months, President Moon transformed tensions between Washington and Pyongyang on the brink of nuclear war from fire and fury to Olympic unity. On the world stage, President Moon and Chairman Kim shook hands, crossed the demarcation line dividing Korea, holding hands. And you all remember that, don't you?
Yes, yes.
I mean, I was weeping when I saw this. And signed the Panmunjom Declaration, charting an end to the Korean War and a new era of peace for the Korean people. At a breakneck pace, President Moon and his administration have been engaged in shuttle diplomacy between Washington and Pyongyang. In May, the day after Trump canceled his meeting with Kim, and in fact, Medea and I were in South Korea with women across the DMZ on that day. We were there having seen days and days and days of the Korean people with smiles on their face saying, my God, the U.S. President is going to meet with the chairman of North Korea, and maybe there will be peace on the Korean Peninsula if the U.S. will stop its warmongering. And then that day that President Trump said, no, I'm canceling that, you could just see the smiles leaving the faces of virtually every person in South Korea that we ran into. In May, the day after Trump canceled his meeting with Kim, President Moon met Chairman Kim in Pyongyang. He didn't let, in Panmunjom, he didn't let that stop him from meeting the chief of South Korea, North Korea, and succeeded in getting North Korea-U.S. talks back on track.
Yeah.
And although Trump yesterday canceled Secretary of State Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang next week, President Moon is still slated to meet with Chairman Kim in Pyongyang in September. He has not canceled his trip. But Moon can only keep the diplomatic rails on track for so long. And he is doing his best to keep free North Korea from the yoke of U.S. domination, especially under the tempestuous and inconsistent U.S. president. On his August 15th Liberation Day speech, and that's liberation from the Japanese occupation, President Moon declared, we are part of this Korean-related issues, it's just not the United States. Advancement in relations between North and South Korea is the driving force behind the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. President Moon saying specifically, we as South Koreans, we are in this, and we are going to be the driving force with North Korea on this whole issue of nuclearization, and the U.S. kiss off. Actually, Christine did not say that last time. And that's where we all come in. It just isn't Korea's war, it's America's war. And the peace movement isn't just fighting those who want a new Korean war. We are taking on the military, think tank, media, political, industrial complex that benefits from the status quo. On June 12th, President Trump shook hands with Chairman Kim Jong-un and signed the Singapore Declaration, where the two leaders agreed to, number one, improve relations, number two, establish a peace regime, number three, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and number four, repatriation of U.S. servicemen remains. Instead of cheering on this historic beginning, the detractors, ranging from the Washington, D.C. blogs, that's Christine's comment, to the corporate media, to the so-called resistance Democrats, slammed prospects for peace. and introduced legislation restricting the president from drawing down U.S. troops from South Korea. From how dare a U.S. standing president meet with the despot, to Trump got played, to virtually every major media and pundit blasting the Trump-Kim summit, including when Trump canceled the U.S. South Korean military exercise, which Trump rightly called provocative. I mean, how many years have we all been calling for the suspension, if not the total abolition, of those military exercises? I mean, forever we've been calling for it.
Right.
And Trump finally did it. And that's about the only thing I'm going to give him credit for. Meeting with Chairman Kim and trying to move this thing on. No wonder there was such an uproar. Defense stocks fell. Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, and Lockheed Martin all took a hit. Shall we cheer for that? According to one chief investment officer, if weapons are used, then they need to be replaced. Yeah, that makes war a growth story for these stocks, and one of the big potential growth stories has been North Korea. The rare message that needs to be heard is that North Korea is not going to give up its nuclear arsenal without a security guarantee. Pyongyang has always called for a step-by-step approach, and they have already made several concessions. North Korea has halted nuclear and missile tests. They've dismantled one nuclear test site and satellite launch sites. They've released 3 detained Americans, and they have repatriated the remains of 55 U.S. servicemen from the Korean War. And that is just a part of the number of remains that are in North Korea that the North Koreans for the last 12 years have been asking the U.S. government just give us a letter saying for humanitarian reasons we request the return of these remains, and North Korea has always been ready to do that, from the Clinton administration, the Bush, the Obama, and finally it was the Trump administration that gave them that tiny little letter, and they said, here you are. The U.S. what has the U.S. done? Well, we have halted the one joint military exercise, which can be resumed tomorrow if the U.S. wants it to. That's all we've done. While the prospect of undoing 70 years of mistrust and propaganda seem daunting and impenetrable, they aren't. The greatest enemy to peace on the Korean Peninsula is apathy and the belief that we cannot overpower the forces who want perpetual war. While there is so much uncertainty, especially with regards to the Mueller investigation and midterm elections, there is one constant. It's you, me, and us, the movements of peace and justice, fighting for the soul and future of this nation. It was the Korean War, after all, which inaugurated the Cold War and the military-industrial complex. According to the foremost Korea historian, Bruce Cummings, the Korean conflict was the occasion for transforming the United States into a very different country than it had ever been before. One with hundreds of permanent military bases abroad, a large standing army, and a permanent national security state at home. The Korean War came along and saved us, said Dean Acheson, Truman's Secretary of State, because it quadrupled the defense budget, militarized U.S. foreign policy, and cemented the idea of the United States as the world's policeman. And so that which has been erected by men can be undone.
By women.
And especially by women. So Christine says, I am pleased to report that Women Across the DMZ has formed a coalition with the Nobel Women's Initiative and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom to launch a 2020 women-led Korea Peace Treaty campaign. And we will be mobilizing women globally to put pressure on the United States. And she also means to say women and men. We thank you, men, for all of your kind help, but this is going to be a women-driven project.
Yeah.
States, the UN, and other key countries to see through a peace agreement to end the Korean War, we see Veterans for Peace as our central partner in this campaign. Your experience challenging the U.S. government gives us strength and moral fortitude that peace is the only just and right path. And so, all of you, as we are gathered tonight, Christine says, we thank you. We thank you for your commitment to end the war and militarism, righting the wrongs of U.S. war and occupation, and healing the past. And as the Korean people are showing, there is no more time to hate, only time for love, peace, and a brighter future for the people. Let us stand with Koreans and help unite the Korean Peninsula that our government divided over 70 years ago. Not only will we have more money to invest in things that will give us genuine human security, it will restore the promise of what this country can be. So from Christine on and myself and all of us with Women Across the DMZ and everyone, we thank Veterans for Peace for your great, great support over the years, and we look forward to working with you for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. Women are the peacemakers, and the more that the women are taking the lead in the peace movement and in Veterans for Peace, the better off we all are. Christine Ahn was very generous to mention my name in relationship to the People's Peace Treaty with North Korea. I had a very small role in coordinating some of the writing of that on behalf of a broader peace movement collaboration, which is now consolidated into the Korea Peace Network. But our own John Kim was the author of that People's Peace Treaty with North Korea. And John heads up Veterans for Peace, Korea Peace Campaign, and because of his leadership, Veterans for Peace has been able to have a significant role in this effort for peace in Korea. So I want to give another shout out to John Kim. And really, it was so nice to hear the voices of our sisters and brothers from Okinawa. And but just remind me, and I've mentioned a couple other times during the convention, but for those of you who may not have heard, Veterans for Peace is now an international organization. We have chapters in a number of countries and growing, and several of those chapters are represented here, including Japan Veterans for Peace. If you could take a bow. You're better than the whole. And we have members of United Kingdom, UK Veterans for Peace with us. They're already at the pub. We have Chuck Searcy is here representing our expatriate chapter in Vietnam. And one of the workshops yesterday we had via Skype or Zoom or one of those video internet platforms. We had members of one of our newest chapters, the deported veterans of Tijuana.
Yeah. Willie.
Okay, now it's my pleasure to introduce Doug Zachary, who does a wonderful job every year appealing to your hearts and your wallets, and looking for some more lifetime memberships in Veterans.